any links between autoimmune diseases and omega-6 fats?
So let me give you, I'll start with a little anecdote. I have a family history of allergies and eczema going back, my daughter has it, I have it, had it, my father had it. My father had eczema so badly when he was a kid that he had no fingerprints. All of his fingerprints were basically burned off his hands by the eczema. My father had allergy shots. I had allergy shots. My older daughter, who had really, same bad eczema, bad allergies, was on deck for allergy shots. She was seeing the same allergy practice that I was seeing that I had seen when I was a kid. And then I fixed my diet. And I started reading about this stuff. And I read a really interesting book by a Dennis Burkitt and the other fellow who wrote the book with Trowell, called Western Diseases, Their Emergence and Prevention. And these were two doctors who worked in Africa during the time that the Western diet was introduced. And what they talked about in Africa was the emergence of different diseases, right? I mean, for instance, diverticulitis is what Burkitt is famous for. He's the one who came up with a hypothesis that a lack of fiber protects you against diverticulitis, although we now know that doesn't really work all that well. It didn't work for me. But it's a fascinating book. And then you get to this section in this book on autoimmunity. And what they say, it's pretty short, because they say autoimmune diseases were unknown in Africa prior to the introduction of the Western diet. Unknown? Really? Unknown. So, what are the common elements of a Western diet? Well, it's refined sugar, refined wheat and other carbohydrates, but mainly wheat, and refined seed oils, right? Bingo, those three. So I told my daughter, who didn't like the idea of going on this paleo diet, not eating wheat bread anymore, I said, I bet you that if you stick with this diet, that you won't need these allergy shots, right? Okay. 2 years later, we're at the allergist in the middle of allergy season, in the spring, cars are all covered with pollen, everybody's sneezing. And there's my daughter sitting in front of the allergist, and she has no sign of allergies. None. He fired her as a patient. And he said to me, and I had told him that I thought this was going to happen, and he just couldn't get his head around it. And he did say to me, I've never seen allergies resolve this quickly, and with no treatment. She never did get the allergy shots. Now she went off the diet, she was a kid. She still kind of follows it, but not as closely as I do. And her allergies have come back a little bit, but they're not as bad as they were. And she's not going to need shots. She takes, Claritin during allergy season. So complete resolution of allergies confirmed by a medical doctor in 2 years. Not too shabby, right? So what causes autoimmunity? There are 3 known causes I've found in the literature that will reliably cause autoimmunity in humans. The first is poison ivy, which we don't eat for obvious reasons. Interestingly enough, apparently about 20% of the population doesn't have any reaction to poison ivy, so go figure. The other 2 are wheat, celiac disease and type 1 diabetes, and seed oils. Right? So there's your Western diet, wheat and seed oils, the 2 known causes of autoimmune disease, right? My allergies are gone, totally gone. I used to be terribly allergic. The one thing that really the shots never did the job for was dust. And at one point I spent, I was moving out of a house. I spent 3 months cleaning things out. Nothing, no allergies. No allergic reaction to dust. I now have a dog. I'm allergic to dogs. Nothing. So my allergies are totally gone. My asthma is totally gone. My eczema is totally gone, right? So what happens here, right? Let's start with poison ivy. Poison ivy is a fat called urushiol, which has been extremely well studied because we all know it as lacquer, right? Lacquer, the furniture, is actually made from the sap of the poison ivy plant. So they've done a lot of research into it because people who work with lacquer get lots of skin rashes, not surprisingly. Lacquer causes your body to become an autoantigen, right? It changes the molecules in your cells so that your body thinks it is foreign, right? In urushiol, this process is dependent on how much polyunsaturated fat is in the oil, okay? Wheat is slightly different. It's the same process, but it's caused by an amino acid, 33-mer, which causes effectively let me see if I can get this. I haven't run through this in a couple of years, but 33-mer causes tissue transglutaminase, which is an enzyme that's used all throughout your body and in your gut to be altered in such a way that your body attacks it. And also that proteins that tissue transglutaminase makes are altered such that your body will attack them, which is why celiac disease as a disease has so many different manifestations, because it can effectively make you allergic to any part of your own body, right? We talked about oxidized LDL before and how that's caused by omega-6 fats. That is an autoimmune reaction, right? In doing the research on oxidized LDL, they came up with an antibody because they wanted to be able to identify it. And what they discovered was that this antibody was identical to a germline antibody against staph bacteria. Right? So your blood, the LDL in your blood, becomes indistinguishable to your body from a bacteria. Boom, there's your autoimmunity. Right? Now, it turns out that this same antibody also reacts against something called cardiolipin. Cardiolipin is a crucial part of your mitochondria, right, which are crucial for life. Cyanide kills you because it breaks your mitochondria. So most autoimmune diseases have what they call antiphospholipid antibodies. Antiphospholipid antibodies are antibodies against oxidized cardiolipin, this molecule that's only found on the inside of your mitochondria. When that has omega-6 fats in it and they get oxidized, it breaks down into its antigen and it gets attacked by the body, right? This is common in every single autoimmune disease. I don't know about type 1. I think type 1 causation, from what I read, is from wheat, because it's the same genetic background, and there's a huge overlap, as I'm sure you know, between celiac disease and type 1 diabetes, and of course celiac disease and any other autoimmune disease. So these are the three, poison ivy, duh, we all know that causes an autoimmune reaction. That's hardly controversial. We all know wheat causes an autoimmune reaction. And we all ought to know that seed oils cause an autoimmune reaction. They make your body think it's suffering from an infection. Right? And that's why it starts attacking itself.
Perhaps interesting here to note that some of the indigenous populations don't suffer from type 2 diabetes, obviously, but they don't also suffer from type 1 diabetes
Right.
or other, as you said, other autoimmune diseases. Right.
And my hypothesis, the fellow who's done the most research on wheat is Alessio Fasano. And so one of the really interesting things about celiac disease is that the incidence of celiac disease has gone up almost fourfold since the end of World War II. And I mean, that's clearly something where you need a genetic predisposition, most likely, depending on what definition you use. But the common definition is that you have a genetic predisposition to it, and you have to be exposed to wheat, and there has to be some kind of a trigger, right? Which is very similar to type 1 diabetes. Something triggers it. Not everybody who has the genetic predisposition gets it. So with type 1 diabetes, I know they think that Coxsackie virus can trigger it in some people. Fasano's hypothesis is that possibly there's some change in the gut microbiome that's happened over the last 40 years that may be the reason that celiac disease is going up in prevalence, because the genetics haven't changed and the wheat consumption hasn't changed. So it has to be something else that's changing. Now, linoleic acid can alter the gut microbiome. This is very well known. And it also can induce this pathogenic reaction in the body. So I wonder if, our increasing consumption of seed oils isn't also what's triggering our increased levels of celiac disease and type 1 diabetes. Hypothesis. But that said, my first piece of advice to anybody with any autoimmune disease is get rid of wheat, get rid of seed oils, because they're both known causes of autoimmunity.
Yes. And perhaps that's why people who don't make any changes to their diet or nutrition find themselves developing yet another autoimmune disease,
right.
And a third one and a fourth one. It's very, very common with type 1 diabetics. So
right.
Yeah, it's the best thing you can do for your health today. And it really doesn't, it's not a huge change of what you eat, really. I mean, cutting out wheat and cutting out sugar and changing your oils, it's not sort of a really extensive change of diet.